All right, good morning, people. Happy Friday. Bob here, back once again. We're ready to break down some Bitcoin. Let's get right down to it. Hey, daily chart in front of us here. Couple different ways this thing looks like it could go at this point. So let's talk about that. I'm not going to talk upside targets for the moment because we've discussed those fairly well ad nauseum. I think that it would not be worthwhile for us to do that here today. So, because again, we're looking here or here for our next move if we're going up. Now, the issue here becomes what I talked about yesterday, and we'll see it on one of my other charts. We did hit a 702 Fibonacci extension retracement level based on the fall from here down to here, and the 702 is typically where you might expect a rejection to come in, and we got rejected there. So let's talk about some different things that we see here that might be problematic, and obviously we've talked about this guy before here because I already had this on here. If we have a double top that came in here on the daily, which we already had, and it didn't completely lose it. It should. Well, granted, this one had bearish divergence too, but this one's pretty well a straight double top, right? I mean, we did get a slightly higher close here, but otherwise, this thing's as close to a true double top as you can get. In the event that we ultimately lose this level, this would be the confirmation line here. So that's down already at 22.7 basically. We lose that line, and all of a sudden we're back down to 21.200, testing out this support here. We already back tested this one, so in the event that we come back down here again, the likelihood that we fall through this support this time becomes much greater. But we've also got to fall through this line, which it seems the bulls are defending. So, really anything, from here down to here, 22.3. So, that number, 22.6, 20, these numbers here are totally logical then in terms of what could happen, right? That's one of the things I'm seeing here, and that is, we got to lose a lot of levels to get there, and certainly it's not going to happen in a day, although I suppose it's possible when you look at days like these ones over here. But first we got to work our way down, lose this level, lose this level, lose. We got to lose them as we go. The interesting thing is the stochastic RSI is still a buy, but the MACD histogram would suggest that there is very little strength left in the move here. So I don't know that this ends up meaning anything here. It very well, by the time today's over, this thing could just be curled right over on itself and in fact showing that we are going to head down. This trend line here is still holding up for now, but you got to question whether or not that's going to happen. Again, I'll put my cursor here, and you can see the crosshair. It crosses right here, high, lower high, and now if this thing doesn't turn into a higher low, which means we can't lose this level. And that's basically what I'm going to be looking for today, is that we're basically going to come back and retest the daily 21 moving average at this point. I mean, given how this stuff over here looked, it may not be that simple, right? I mean, each time Bitcoin has made moves to the tops of this to the top of this pattern, it's actually taken several days to really play out at all. Whereas sometimes you just get these boom, 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 quick beat downs, and then it's game on again. It's tough to say on this one, really. I would say that it's probably, especially if there's going to be more upside involved here, this is probably more like what we're going to get. But we've got some strong negative patterns in there as well, so it's really tough to say for sure at this point. But on the daily, again, we're 23. Then we're looking possibly down to 22.6. Then possibly looking down to 21.8, 21.3. We've got some downside targets for sure that could come into play. So we'll see what happens there. You know, and I guess just to at least touch on it, I mean, right now, the weekly chart still looks good though, right? So, I mean, there's going to be strong support here regardless of how we slice it. There's going to be very strong support here at this 23,100 level. But like I said, to start this week, I have seen where you end up with this downside wick on a doji where that thing ultimately turns into a downside push. This one, however, did not play out that way because, well, this one double bottomed. In this case, I just don't know, and I think it's still feasible that, in fact, we do just crap right down through there. But, you know, again, certainly that's not a given. And again, there are a lot of positive things to be seen on the daily chart, or on the weekly chart here, right? That we're holding support. We got a ton of volume that's been coming in. You know, there are some positive things to be seen there. And then also, you know, as far as this part goes, for the time being at least, our weekly RSI lines are holding up as well. This bottom is holding up. This upward channel is currently holding up. The only way that changes in the event that we do, in fact, see some sort of downward parabolic move out of Bitcoin. And then this thing is no longer working that way. You know, just that's the simple of it there. But again, it would have to happen that way. And right now, it's feasible that Bitcoin is just simply going to backtest one of these highs here. One of them is at about 23.7, which is, you know, we're bouncing around that area right now. And then the other one would be at 23.3. So again, these are numbers we've already kind of discussed and would be logical locations for potential retests of a breakout. So again, there are different things that I could say here that maybe, just maybe, it would actually present the case that we're still going to work our way to the upside. I just don't know that it's necessarily a given at this point. I don't feel as strongly about the idea that this thing does in fact continue to the downside or to the upside. At least in the interim. I mean, it's, you know, we're coming up against these significant levels of resistance and, you know, obviously struggling to break them. But, you know, if we can close out the week above 24,000, that would be an ideal scenario, right? That would be ideal. Come back up here, actually close out the week above 24K. This line right here, 24,085 on this chart. Close above there, and then we're feeling pretty good about what we've got going on there. You know, obviously getting a daily close has not been sufficient. Well, and technically, I guess that's the other thing too. Technically, we've not put in a single close above 24,085 bucks on the daily chart either. And even here, I mean, this one ended up closing. You know. No, none of the candle bodies are up above 23,964. So in reality, we might be in a position where, in fact, yeah, I mean this may or may not work out to our benefit. There's still some chance here that this thing holds up. We got the 80 in here, the 80 simple moving average on the daily, acting as support right now. We are getting a nice upside push at the moment. So who knows? Maybe again you know, this thing could do a lot of things today, and it's tough to say for sure what it's going to do. But we've got a ton of support and resistance right through here, which means we may very well be subject to the same thing over here. Now, what would prevent me from thinking that that's a logical conclusion? Let's zoom in on some shorter-term time frames here. I think this is a good chart for us to look at. You know, it's interesting because on this one, we never actually closed any candles above this level on the 4-hour. And now we're back down inside of this fib retracement level here. You know, the interesting thing I see on this 4-hour chart. So we had this line connecting a couple of candle bodies and wicks here. We've broken back inside of that. Now it's kind of it probably bounces around in here. So if we're gonna have a good weekend for the altcoins, this is how I see this playing out. The Bitcoin just kind of hangs out in here for a little bit before eventually coming down. And then that way it would give the alts a chance to go ahead and do their thing over the weekend, or while Bitcoin maybe spends some time just kind of bouncing around in this region between, say, 23.6 and about 23.9. That's a feasibility. And again, we've got all these moving averages down below, so we've got a lot of support potentially, but eventually we got to come back and retest this 200 simple on the 4-hour chart at some point. Okay, we have to. It is essentially a necessity. So, at some point, we come back down and test it. It would be great if it waited to put in the test until that 200 actually makes its way to right here, because this would be an amazing place for us to put in a bullish retest. Okay, an amazing spot for a bullish retest, because it would be essentially retesting this trend line that was broken previously, which is a falling, broadening wedge kind of a look. That would be one spot where it would be amazing. And then we've got this trend line that was broken and then already retested. If we get a second retest, that comes in right about there, maybe right when this is coming through. So that would be great. And, so again, there's some seriously positive places that we could get bullish retests. Then the problem becomes just, hey, what's the reality here? We as far as on this move from here to here, we have yet to come back and retest any of these lower retracement levels. So again, a 0.50, a 0.618, totally logical numbers to come back and test. Maybe one thing that I would say that would maybe prevent me from believing it does come all the way back down there. Two things. One, this point of control here, sitting just above or just below 23,000 basically. That means there's a ton. That means that this is where the buyers and sellers are stacked the most. That when it falls below this level, people want to sell it. As long as it stays above this level, people are buying. So it's kind of it's kind of a double agent, if you will. I think that would be a fairly reasonable description to provide you for it, is that it's acting as a double agent, right? But the point is that we've tested the 0.5. We didn't come back to the 618. Bitcoin likes to come back to the 618, so I wouldn't be massively surprised to, in fact, see this. Now, we then got to bounce bullish from there, though, right? We don't want to come crashing down through that, because if we lose the support of the 200 on the 4-hour chart at this point, then things actually start to become fairly problematic, and then we're rolling back way down here, wherever the case is. Then we'll start rolling back way down. So we don't want that. Let's avoid it if we can. So yeah, we'll see how much this 23,610 level holds up. Here's what I wanted to point out on the 4-hour chart, and it's maybe even more obvious on the hourly chart, but this will work for the moment. We've got a head, shoulder, shoulder. So assuming that in fact this ends up playing out into a head and shoulder, the measured move from that would take us down. So it's about a $1,500, about a $900 measured move based on here to here. So you obviously you take $900 off of this level, and all of a sudden you are in fact down here, pretty darn close to the, basically pretty close to the point of control. I mean, slightly below it, obviously, but again we're pushing down into this general region right here, 22.7-ish, so somewhere right about here, which makes sense because again we've got a nice level of support that we built there. But that's really the number that at this stage I probably am most likely to start looking for. The fact that we are back inside of this trend line, and with the patterns that we have here, it seems highly unlikely that we are going to then break out of this back to the upside. But again, who am I? I can just tell you what I see on the charts, not necessarily tell you what will definitely happen. For right now, I'm looking for Bitcoin to bounce up to around this level, so kind of that 22,900 range. I have a feeling that at this point, 24,100 has flipped into a resistance and it's going to probably be that way for a bit. So I'm really just looking kind of just shy of 24, 23.9, 23.880, and I think that's where we're probably going to see it capped out for now. And then again, as long as it kind of bounces around in this as a descending triangle, that's going to give the alts an opportunity to go ahead and do some things this weekend before potentially Bitcoin capitulates out of this and down to where we're talking about. So we'll see as far as that goes as well. Let's zoom in hourly chart. You know, this one's kind of interesting to me. You know, and this is the one where, again, I identified that 702 fib retracement yesterday, and I said, you know, that would be potentially a problematic area. Here it is, that fall from 28,000. We finally retraced up to this level, and you can see the hourly chart. I mean, you know, we had this ascending triangle going here for a while, and then all of a sudden double top and boom, double top here, boom. So if we keep seeing stuff like that, this thing, it may not take much for this thing to come right off the rails. Now, where I might change my mind on that, and I don't have any trend lines around on it now, but you know, we've got so we've got basically this little trend line right here, and then this guy potentially could, you know, it could be forming some sort of rising channel outside of this trend line. But assuming that that is not the case, then this thing is probably going to come up, put in one more bearish retest here before falling out. And again, on the hourly, you can pretty well see that head and shoulder again. Head, shoulder, shoulder. This thing ready to roll over. This is and in this case, it's already fallen below all of those moving averages. So picture what we were just looking at on that 4-hour chart, where all of those moving averages are just hanging out right here waiting to be supportive. However, if we take a look over here, again, these should have been supportive as well. So again, you know, this might be something that starts to happen fairly quickly, again, because we're flipping all these levels now back into a resistance. Lose this level, lose these levels, and we're back down here. So, and again, we've already talked about it, that there's a trend line right there that matches up similarly to that trend line I mentioned on the other chart. And guess what? That would be a very logical place for us to put in a retest. And then the main thing is we just, you know, at this point, we don't want to touch the 0 fib again, right? That's the one we don't want to touch right here. And again, this chart's slightly different than my other charts just because I went peak to peak, or peak to trough. But, you know, this would be another spot that if we are going to see downside over the course of a few weeks here, this would be another spot I would look to hopefully hold up. But again, some downside targets. And I think that, in fact, we are probably likely to see, you know, again, a move at least down to here, and if not down through here. Still a chance this thing bounces out of there. I mean, we've looked at the daily chart, and it's choppy there over the last few days, but it's got feasibility to hold on. It actually does. So, I mean, I'm not ruling it out just yet, but I also don't know that it's necessarily reasonable to believe that it's actually going to occur and that we're somehow just going to rebound up here and break back into a bunch of trend lines that we just lost. So, you know, tough to say, but again, it just seems unlikely at the moment. Yeah, but again, the daily over here, I mean, it just depends. I mean, really, seriously, if we can get a nice push out of Bitcoin today, this thing could pop back up into this range. If that happens, well, then now I got to revisit what I'm thinking, because if we can in fact pop back up to about 24.5 and put in a positive retest, then we're back on this trend line again. Then we're possibly moving up and above this line. So again, it's all going to depend on what happens in here today. And again, I think this 4-hour chart is a great indication of it. But as you can see here, as I scroll the chart, now the point of control is right around here. So even this 23,800 level, you know, it seems fairly evident that the bears would like to defend that, and they'd like to defend this. So again, the likelihood is, as of right now, I would say it's far more likely that we see downside. And part of that too comes back to this. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, and kind of a 3 drive kind of a thing, right? So here was your first drive down, here was drive number 2, and then there was the third drive. This one, I would say, potentially could be looked at as one of the drives down. then the only question becomes, is that a fair assessment to make, given that this was really almost looked more like a retest of a breakout? And then I guess the only question would be, all right, well, maybe we got this trend line here, and let's just say we use it this way instead and call that a fake out, so we don't even, we'll negate that. And then here was drive 1, 2, 3. And then in reality, this line right here, assuming that this is a valid line right here, then we do in fact still have at least one more drive down out of Bitcoin. And then the flip side of that would be in the event that somehow this miraculously fires on up here again, say to like right here, rolls over to this level and then bounces out, and it basically turns it into an inverted head and shoulder, which is the good version of it. But again, the way that it looks right now, I mean, at least it's holding this level for now. This is the confirmation of once it loses this level, that's when we can assume fairly safely that we make the trip down to the measured move target, which again would put us right here. And again, that's a number that we're going to be talking about probably a lot, unless we see something happen where this thing breaks back out of here and surprises the heck out of me at this point. But again, we shall see. We shall see. We're getting a little push right now, and that's, like I said, that was something that was fairly likely to happen back up into this region or this region. But again, the likelihood is we come up here and get rejected. At least at least the way it would stand right now. But again, the daily chart says, maybe not. We've retested a 236 fib level. How much push are we going to get out of it? And that's going to, I mean, if it only comes up to here, say 23.9, and then it rolls back over, that's when we could say with fairly relative certainty, yep, we are in fact heading down further. But we got to lose this level for that to happen. Right now, that would just be, I'm just speculating as to what will happen. But again, if we lose this level, down we go. So, really, I don't have a whole lot more for you today. Just FYI, I will not be doing videos next week. I will be vacationing. So if you need me, I'll be on a beach in Cabo. And Matt will be more than happy to keep us all posted in the interim. But yeah, I'll be watching here today, taking off in a few hours here. But otherwise, we'll be watching up until that point in time. And who knows? I mean, maybe this thing does fire right back off up here, drops this, turns this back into support as well, and then off it goes. That would be really the only way to combat this at this point. Would be to come up here. Now, the one thing is, even on the 15-minute chart, this crash pattern is not complete. So chances are it kind of pops up here just a little bit and then either reverses back out this direction or maybe even comes straight back down through. And that'll be an interesting one here. But we're getting an oversold bounce right now. And that's logical. Probably come up to around here or here, which, again, is what I'm literally talking about here. And then potentially rolls back over. But again, this is a 15-minute chart, so I'm not too massively caught up on what it's got going on here. But reclaim some levels and we're happy. We lose some more levels and we're not going to be very happy. So, hey, we appreciate you. Pleasure as always. I look forward to catching up in, about 10 days. In the meantime, stay safe, and we'll keep looking for the big gainers.